All right, welcome all. I hope you had a good lunch, got a chance to talk to people, relax a little bit. I'm going to be introducing Nicholas Harris. He's going to be presenting on Secure Software Development Framework. Nicholas is with the Oregon State Police. So a little bit about him here. He's a committed CJS Information Security Officer with over 8 years of experience ensuring the protection of criminal justice information in Oregon. With a strong foundation in security from his 22-year career in the U.S. Navy, and he just confided to me that, if he didn't have such a strong naval background with his family, he would have went into the Coast Guard like myself. But, oh well, you can't win them all. Including Director of Security at Evergreen International Aviation. Also going to throw in he does have his own private pilot's license, too. He was with the FBI Civil Aviation Joint Terrorism Task Force, and as the CGAIS ISO, Nick serves as the primary liaison between the Oregon State Police and the FBI, ensuring compliance with information security standards and fostering collaboration with state, county, and municipal governments. He provides guidance, conducts risk assessments, mitigates threats, and investigates misuse cases involving CGIS data. His exceptional leadership has enabled the Oregon State Police to achieve 100% compliance and zero findings during the last two CGIS Systems Agency IT security audits. Additionally, Nick serves, which is amazing because I'm just side shot here. Any audit I've ever been involved in, it's like you almost have to throw the auditors a small bone because they need to find something. They can't just have a totally clean report. Additionally, Nick serves on the Cybersecurity Task Force for the FBI and is the vice chair of the CGIS Advisory Policy Board, Security and Access Subcommittee, and where he helps shape national security policies. He also loves spending time with his family, has 4 grandchildren and 3 dogs. So without further ado, Nicholas Harris.
Okay, I'm one of those guys that likes to move around because it's harder for me to be a target. So that's one of my philosophies on that. I took a look out here in the audience right quick. I don't know whether to be offended or applauded for, scaring everybody away or, just not winning that popularity contest. One of the speakers spoke earlier about, I think it was my friend Dave from OSU, about not having the great looks and charisma, but apparently I have neither one of those skills either. So anyways, it's a pleasure to be here today. One thing I want to ask right first and foremost, how many students I have here? 2 in the front, brave souls, 2 in the back, and 1 in the back. Okay, perfect. Okay, so if any one of you are interested in doing a job shadow, come up and grab me and I will give you a business card. And you can get to see what my role in criminal justice information systems comprises of, and we'll get you a good understanding of that. You will not find me on LinkedIn. If you're a security professional like myself, you'll understand why I'm not on LinkedIn. So that's the best way to find me. So just feel free to come and find me afterwards, and we'll talk about some mentorship participation here. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about SSDF today. Basically what the whole topic of this conference is supposed to be about. And we're going to kind of go through the whole thing about what it is and how I applied it real world. As I said, thank you for having me here. It's the first time Oregon State Police has participated in this as far as like a speaker is concerned. And I wanted to point out that first and foremost, you heard it in other topics, that collaboration is key. In our industry, what you'll find is as soon as there's a cybersecurity incident, everybody's like, runs and hides, and and then the poor IT guy is left with like trying to restore the services. And the last thing they need is my position, if they're dealing with criminal justice information systems, calling them up and saying, hey, what's going on? Because his first or her first priority is to restore services, and the last thing they want to deal with is the ISO for the state with regards to OSP is concerned, saying, hey, what's going on? So if you have ever, I can say in this industry, is don't hide things. share information. There's probably times where you're going to come across where you're going to have information that your attorneys are going to be like, no, don't say anything. Don't share that information. We don't want to get sued. But there is ways to share information amongst us. We're a small community throughout the state, and all that information that you share will possibly help somebody else to think outside the box to defend their networks or their infrastructure from bad actor attacks, okay? One thing that I like to do every time there's a major incident is the first thing I do is I'll go to the Mitri Attack website. I'll go through and look at every single thing on there as far as like attack vectors, go through each one of the things, and then I go to the remediation and then tell the other agencies that deal with CJIS and say, hey, look, this is a potential threat. These are things that you should be looking at as far as like remediation is concerned. And if you've been in this business long enough, one thing you're going to understand is not if, it's when you will have a cybersecurity incident. And it could be as something as drastic as a ransomware where they completely take down your whole network and encrypt it, or it can be something as innocent as somebody clicking on the wrong link and getting their email compromised. So you just have to be constantly on the forefront of everything that's going on. Okay. So the purpose of this today is we're going to talk about in this special publication 800 TAC 218. Our outcomes are we're going to basically look over the 4 core practices. We're going to talk about preparing the organization, protecting software, producing well, secure software, respond to vulnerabilities, implementing SSDF into our procurement process, and how to manage your software after implementation of the audit. And the reason why we do this is about defending our infrastructure and holding our vendors accountable. So the first and foremost thing I wanted to bring to your attention is, as an auditor, I need something to say, what's my authority to audit? And my authority is the CJIS security policy, which follows the NIST 800 TAC 53, Rev 5. CJIS takes 18 of the 20 controls contained within NIST 800 TAC 53. Falls under the moderate controls, and so that's how we assess our cybersecurity awareness. So what I did was I took the NIST 800 TAC 218 and SSDF framework Vol 1, version 1.1. And I took both of those and I went through the SSDF and every single thing that was on there, and I went and found the NIST 800 TAC 53, found the controls that applied to CJIS, built those into my vendor questionnaire, and then submitted that to vendors that directly dealt with CGI. Okay. So, first thing we have to do is we have to come up with a strategy on this. And like I said, when you're procuring software, you're going to have the software development lifecycle. You have to understand how long this thing is going to be around, how long it's going to be in your environment as a tool, and what the intention of it is, the type of data that it's going to be utilizing, and potential growth. So like if you're going out and procuring software and they're saying, well, we operate under the base controls of COBOL under the mainframe, you might want to reconsider a different vendor, okay? There's a lot of different vendors out there, and you got to be very particular about looking at what they're designing their software with, because this is something that you're buying, something that you're going to own, and something that you're going to expect your operators to use. So we come to the practices. This is our battle plan. As you can see, there are 4. Prepare the organization, prepare the software, produce well-secured software, and respond to the vulnerabilities. How do we do that? And this is basically enhancing our cybersecurity. So first one we're going to look at is prepare the organization. Everybody should recognize this guy if you're a U of O student. Okay, Coach Lanning. Prepare the organization. I don't know if you guys gone out and looked at all the videos that are out there on YouTube and stuff. When every single week, what does Coach Lanning do? He calls a team in, has a team meeting, talks about who their next opponent is going to be, talks about the weaknesses, talks about their strengths, talks about the theme of what this game is going to be. So if you're going out and produce or procure software, get your team together, identify your stakeholders, get everybody excited, get a good project manager, get a good business analyst, okay? Because the more that you prepare your organization for what you're trying to bring into your environment, the better you will be. If you just say, I'm just gonna go out and buy something off the shelf and plug it in and expect my users to adapt to it, you're running into some serious problems. Oh, let me go back to this. I forgot one thing. Vet personnel and vendor trustworthiness. Big one. Understand where your developers are coming from. I had an organization that was requesting to use a vendor's services, and they wanted to vet all of the programmers. Well, some of the program team wasn't even in the continental US. They were in a third country, and they were using a development team that was not allowed to basically access criminal justice information, and so they could not be utilized. So make sure that when you're contracting with your vendors to understand what their teamwork or their team is, and ensure that they are properly vetted and understand who they are. Okay, protecting the software. Enforce secure coding standards. Apply encryption and authentication controls. Manage dependencies and patching. Cannot overstate this enough. When they are coming up with coding the software, make sure that they're following all the applicable standards. Make sure that they understand that everything that is being proposed is transparent to you, so that way you can go back and verify that they are following the appropriate controls to make your product secure. Apply encryption and authentication controls. Make sure that there's multi-factor authentication. Make sure that they're following the most up-to-date standards. So like if they're pushing TLS 1.2, that's being phased out. Make sure that they're making appropriate means to shift over to TLS 1.3. FIPS 140 TAC 2 is now moving to FIPS 140 TAC 3. Make sure that they are aware of these things, and make sure that you question them when they're proposing using outdated stuff. So the more that you are engaging and looking into their practices in the development cycle, the better off you will be. And then on the back end of it, once it goes into production, make sure that they have the necessary dependencies and knowing that what that thing is built under, and make sure that that patching is happening after it's been pushed into operation. Okay, so produce well-secured software. Secure builds from commit through release, integrate testing, validation for vulnerabilities, protect secrets, and enable audit-ready logging. Make sure that that software has each and every one of these things. And I'm going to plug CISA because, as you heard before, they're not here, but they are here. And get those pen tests, get those scans, use the
independent scans that you can get. Ask the vendor prior to production what the actual app scan was that they used. Did they use OWASP? Have them produce what risks that they are mitigating. Make sure that you understand that if they didn't take the recommended, that they disclose what that was and what reason why they did that. And respond to vulnerabilities, detect, triage, remediate flaws quickly, capture lessons learned from continuous improvement, demonstrate incident response readiness to auditors. And by auditors, that would be like somebody like me or somebody that would come in from Secretary of State if you're a government agency, or even an independent auditor if you're a private company. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a case study right now. Vendor X and end-of-life Apache Tomcat. This is basically a real-world situation that happened during the procurement process. Went through, asked the vendor, conducted a security review of the software, and asked, it's like, all right, what is everything that is contained within this software? And they provided the list, and lo and behold, it was discovered they were using Apache Tomcat that was no longer supported. And this is prior to full operation. So if this would have gone unfounded, as far as undisclosed, and would have been pushed, you can imagine downline what could have happened. And with this, it would have been terrible, because we're talking about a system that is responsible for providing criminal justice information to law enforcement throughout the state. So the audit gap is that when we initially were in the procurement process, it wasn't, the details weren't fully disclosed as far as like versions, exact details. And so those questions weren't asked. It's just like, hey, we're giving you this piece of software, and this is everything that we developed it with, but never went down to the minutia of saying what versions. We just kind of like took the assumption that, hey, yes, this is what is developed under, and we just kind of like, okay, we gave assurances. And that's one thing that if you're an auditor, it's always that saying, trust but verify. So you have to go back and verify what the answers are when you ask those questions of a vendor. So like I was saying, the implications if it was undetected: security exposure, remote code execution, privilege escalation, could have been exploited by attackers. Could have had bad actors, foreign state actors infiltrate a system that is relied upon on law enforcement and other licensing agencies, and that data could have been compromised, and it could have not been available if it was encrypted, and really bad things could have happened with that. Would have been a CJIS violation, because CJIS under SAA 22 says you can no longer use end-of-life software. And anything that's non-supported is a CJIS violation. Would have been an operational risk. We have to rely on this thing. It has to be available consistently. Cannot have that any type of non-availability. It would have been very detrimental to officer safety and public safety. In the audit consequences, if it was discovered post-incident, then it would have been like a blame game. It's like, well, why didn't you do that? And then it would have came back to us as, well, why didn't you discover it? So you don't ever want to get in that situation where you're in that point of actually where it's being utilize that you have to get in that fight with a vendor that says, well, why didn't you do it this way? They're going to come back, well, you knew what you were doing. You signed the dotted line. You're the one that put it into operation. So don't put yourself in that situation. It's not worth the fight. And then the last thing is vendor accountability. Without vendor-based validation, the self-attestation of the vendor, it wouldn't have been able to produce anything as far as like, how it would have been mitigated with proper patch management and audit scrutiny. So the lessons learned from this was that an evidence-driven vendor audit, agencies should require vendors to provide a verifiable artifact, such as a questionnaire as far as providing evidence of what was answered with, and ensuring that they provided everything that they promised and that it was verified. Respond to the vulnerabilities, protect the software, ensures that unsupported software is identified early, and it reduces the risk of, likelihood of systematic risk. So my closing thoughts on this are as follows. SSDF is essential in anything that is going to be introduced into your ecosystem, and it has a high importance as far as availability and reliability and integrity. It protects the sensitive data such as criminal justice information. And here's my follow-up information, in case anybody wants to get a hold of me. And with that, I still have 9 minutes for questions. Wow. Yes, sir. Okay, so the first part is that if it was CJIS, you have the security addendum. Okay, so you can use the language that's contained within the CJIS security addendum. If it's non-CJI, then I would encourage your county or your municipality or your agency to contact your legal. Okay, not an attorney. I'm not going to go down that road. But anyways, bring in your legal. Make sure Oregon Buys, I'll plug the state for this. Their procurement office is really good about going out. They contact me frequently when it comes to criminal justice information to make sure that they are meeting all the controls of the security policy. So there are multiple resources available out there, but I would say that your county attorney or your city attorney or your company's attorney would be the first and foremost. Explain to them as far as like what you're looking into, and make sure that when the vendor shows up with the contract that they go through it thoroughly and ensure that they understand that like if it's sensitive data such as criminal justice information or HIPAA or anything that could get you sued, make sure that your attorneys are directly involved with that. And they should be listed as part of the stakeholders when the project is first identified. Thank you. Yep. Wow. There's a couple things that auditors never hear is, we're glad to see you and come back real soon. I've never heard those things. And I hope I didn't scare anybody because like nobody's coming up. It's funny because like I look across the room here, especially the panel that was up here. I audited all but one of those individuals. So I thought it was kind of funny how I got called out. I don't know if it was a shameless plug or if it was trying to, butter me up before I gave him the next, yep. And Andy. All right, yes.
Kind of a naive question, I'm sure, but why, I assume when agencies are meeting with vendors, they're vendors that are respectable vendors, so why would a vendor be working, pushing an out-of-date software program?
Have you ever heard of you probably are familiar with this, we had a saying in the Navy, lowest bidder does not equate to best product. And when you're depending on like the size of the vendor and how long they've been in business, they can overlook things too. Because when they're promoting a product, especially like in law enforcement community, what I've found in my experience is that with computer-aided dispatch tools, a lot of the companies buy out other companies. And so one thing that when that happens, a vendor will not go out and patch or fix that piece of software that they just bought. And does anybody know the reason why that is? Well, the developer's gone, and two, they want you to buy the product that was their competition. So they're trying to push that away, push it off to the side to get you to buy. So the minute that you bring it to their attention is like, hey, look, this thing is no longer supported. Then what is the salesman going to do? He's going to call you up and say, well, that's true, but we have something that is compliant. So that's typically what the strategy is behind that. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. So I was wondering if you had any kind of recommendations around re-auditing software because, time keeps going on and things go EOL after you've audited it the first time. So do you have any recommendations as to what might trigger re-evaluating software?
Outstanding question. So with NIST 800 TAC 53, which the state follows, I'll give full shout out to the state there. It states that you should review not only your contracts, but your software annually. And so you should reach out to the vendor and say, hey, look, and on top of the annually is also if there's an incident. So an incident can also be a trigger as well to ensure that that scan is done and that they go and produce the evidence that their software is up to date and been patched and necessary precautions taken. That answer your question? Perfect. Yes, sir.
I have a simple follow-up thought, which is open source software that we depend on. You have to do the same auditability stuff for it, including every year. So, yeah, that's a lot of stuff that I should be auditing more often, I guess.
Yes. And I don't know if you caught in the last panel discussion, though, but where they're talking about inventory. Can anybody tell me the reason why inventory is so important? Yes, sir.
Well, for example, Log4j is a really good example of that. You know where Log4j is when a critical vulnerability comes out, you know where it is and how to deal with it.
Exactly.
One example.
Yep. And knowing what, and yes, sir, go ahead.
You can't protect what you don't know.
Exactly. So if you have one of the biggest problems, like you heard the panel discuss on, is that you have users that go out and grab stuff all the time. Law enforcement agencies are a perfect example of that. They're trying to investigate a crime. They have a tool that they need, and they don't necessarily go through the necessary precautions ensuring that the software has been vetted. So they just go out and get it. And then the poor IT managers later on, they do a scan of their network and they're like, what's this? I wasn't aware that this thing came around. And now it produced a vulnerability in your system. So understand your inventory is so important because you need to understand that what's in your environment and what that software is built with and as far as how it was actually produced. If you understand all those things, and then that way when you go through the CVE and you see all these things and you're like, well, I hope nothing that I own falls under one of these categories in the CVE, then, hopefully you guys will be aware of that and can patch accordingly. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
How do you feel about ChatGPT and the like in a CJIS environment?
I thought I was going to dodge the AI question.
And I was going to ask you, also does for like officers, evidence techs, dispatch, do they get training as far as that?
Okay. So my advice, the one thing that I've been pushing to every agency is I've been providing them with the state CIO's guidance, interim guidance on AI. It's been updated a couple times. First and foremost, you should have a policy. The second thing is you need to train all your users to understand the implications of using AI. Okay, they should go through some, like with the state, we have to go through an ethics training of using AI. If you don't have that in your agency or your organization, I strongly suggest you do that. In law enforcement and criminal justice, we have a policy right now that no sensitive data will be placed into AI. We're also doing a lot of testing right now, specifically OSP with Axon. Axon, for those that aren't aware of what Axon is that they're the major manufacturer of body-worn cameras and video evidence, and they're using AI right now to review the video and produce a police report of the audio and video and being pushed to a police report. Okay, I cannot tell you how excited the law enforcement community is about that, because that will cut down on the report writing time drastically. But as with everything, it has to be tested, it has to be vetted and validated that what AI is seeing is producing the accurate data into a report that could potentially be used for prosecution. So there's a lot of stuff that's being pushed right now, but as right now the official guidance is that no criminal justice information will be introduced into AI. Any other questions? Yes, sir. So the flock cameras, again, you're not going to see CGI on a camera, you know, unless of course they're looking at their MDT in their car and you know, taken from a screen. But generally, the camera information does not fall under the CGI category. Anybody else? All right, one last thing. Go Ducks, beat Indiana. All right, thank you.